We have made it back to the offseason here in the St. Louis Dragons franchise here on Madden 24. Last episode, we went through the divisional round of the playoffs, and our Dragons nearly pulled off what would have been one of the most historic comebacks in playoff history against the number one seeded Atlanta Falcons on the road. A game that the Falcons were in clear control of for most of the night. They led by 20 going into the fourth quarter. They led by 16 and had the ball in the red zone with like 4 minutes left. It's honestly impressive the fact that they were able to choke that, but leave it to the Atlanta Falcons to find a way to blow what looked like a lead that could not be blown. We ended up tying it late with two big touchdown drives at the end of the fourth quarter to bring the game into overtime, but unfortunately we did not get the job done. Desmond Ridder had a pretty solid game, especially early for Atlanta, but he slowed down just as the rest of the team. And then on the flip side, Puma Whitlock was not very efficient. He had two bad interceptions. He played very well at the end of the game, but for the first 3.5 quarters, he was not good. I thought our skill position players were pretty solid. I wish we tried to get the ground game involved more with DeAndre Swift, but we were playing against the clock pretty much the whole game. And then defensively, we had our ups and downs, but we did force a handful of turnovers. Jordan Whitehead was all over the field. He had a brilliant game, as was Devin White. And with that, we enter the offseason. Normally, I would have the season recap video and then the free agency video, but what we're going to do today is we're going to lump the two of them into one. We're going to recap the season. We're going to recap the college football season, just so you guys can get a context of that leading up to the draft. And then we will be going through re-signings, free agencies, and off-season trades. So buckle up. We've got a lot to go through. We'll start with our more comprehensive look at the stats. We've already gone through them, or at least some of them, for our stud and dud of the year voting. But now this is more of an objective look, just kind of taking in the bigger picture with the whole team. Obviously, everything starts and ends with Puma Whitlock. And I thought he had a really good second season. I thought we really saw some good flashes of him. He would have been the NFL's leader in passing yards had he not gotten hurt early back in week 3 against New Orleans and missed pretty much that entire game. I think it's fair to say we have our franchise quarterback, but if I were to share a concern, it's the fact that he did not play very well in either playoff game. He has a lot of playoff experience from his college career with the Ohio State Buckeyes. But if you take a look at his passer ratings, second worst and third worst. Completion percentage, bottom 2. His 2 worst completion percentages of the season were the 2 playoff games. That's a little bit alarming. On the ground, we got to see the duo of DeAndre Swift and Darwin Jeskins. I think these two complement off of each other well, and I'm hoping it can be more of the trio next year with Tornado Davis. And that's not to mention Puma Whitlock's a threat on the ground too. I do want to clean up the fumbles. DeAndre Swift coughed it up 3 times. Puma coughed it up 7 times, although he did clean up the fumbles as the year went along. In the receiving game, Jamison Williams, the first 1,000-yard receiver in Dragons history, but he's not the only guy who stood out here. Arturo Modelo, the third-round rookie out of Miami, really played well over the second half of the year. I think we've got a star with him. Isaiah Likely was good again, and we saw even more flashes out of Tykeem Keon and Griffin Weaver. I think these 5 receivers are all really good and could be long-term pieces of our future. The offensive line certainly had its ups and downs, more so with guys being unable to stay on the field, and when they were on the field, they were a very inconsistent bunch. Tyron Smith, the poster child of this, missing around 50% of the snaps this year, and when he was healthy, he was kind of mediocre. I think the defense was the X factor of the team in the sense of when our defense played well, we won the game, and when they didn't play well, we lost. Our offense is good for 20 to 30 points a game, so if the defense allows less than that, we're going to win. If they allow more, we're going to lose. I think the pass rush was inconsistent. It'll be nice having Simeon Bonnet healthy again next year because he missed a large chunk of the year, and even when he was in there, he was pretty banged up. But I do like the flashes we saw from some of the young guys like Trajan Blyshenden and BJ Ojolari, who played really well down the stretch. The secondary had their good and bad moments, but I think we've got a really good cornerback duo of the future with Jeff Okudah and Cam Lucifer. Devin White had a great season. Jordan Whitehead had a very good season. And then the special teams I thought was pretty solid too. Cameron Dicker only missed 3 kicks all year, And Presley Harvin was pretty solid, especially in the playoffs, where he was very good. No kicker punt return touchdowns during the regular season, but obviously Ronrakis Barber, the rookie corner out of the University of Alabama, had the big kick return touchdown to start our rally against Atlanta in the last episode. Here's a look at stats around the entire league. I kind of talked about last year how I feel like stats, especially offensive stats, are deflated. There's less yards than there should be, especially with a lot of the quarterbacks, which is a little bit ironic because I think in Madden 23, stats were often inflated. So because of that, our offense was second in yardage in the NFL, while our defense was 24th. Now, I don't think we had the second best offense, nor do I think we had the 24th best defense. I think that's just a matter of EA's sim being not the best, to put it nicely. There are some interesting faces here atop a lot of these leaderboards. Rashee Rice was the leading receiver across the entire NFL, and he was really good last year as well. The Chiefs had themselves a superstar. Devin White leads the NFL in tackles for a third straight year. He also leads in fumble forces, while the sack champion ends up being Mad Max Crosby with the Raiders, and the Niners have the top two interception getters with Fred Warner and rookie cornerback Jalen Fox. Here's a look at the awards. Patrick Mahomes won the MVP. He had the greatest individual quarterback season maybe ever. 5,000 yards, 47 touchdowns, and just 2 interceptions. Puma, by the way, finished in 4th. The offensive player of the years for both conferences are Mahomes and Deebo Samuel. Puma finishes in 5th in the NFC. The defensive player of the year is Aaron Donald, with no Dragons on the list, while in the AFC, it ends up going to Max Crosby. As for the Rookie of the Years, wow, Carl Lawson second. The AFC Offensive Rookie of the Year was Dasani Madison, the quarterback out of the University of Alabama with the Browns. And the Defensive Rookie of the Year was Chandre Bigsley, the 4th overall pick out of Minnesota, the pass rusher for the Steelers. In the NFC, Matthias Abanda, the wide receiver out of Middle Tennessee State, wins the Offensive Rookie of the Year with Arturo Modelo right behind him in 2nd, while Jalen Fox, the corner out of Duke, wins the Defensive Rookie of the Year with Cam Lucifer in 9th. I feel like Lucifer should have been higher. He had a good year. Here's a look at all of the superstars across this year's draft class. We had 5 X Factors, including Callaghan October, the number 1 overall pick with the New Orleans Saints. No other offensive players, though, and only one other first-rounder, being Christian Kennedy with the Titans. Here are the superstar development players, a larger list of them, including Dexter Sanders, the running back on the 49ers, who we contemplated drafting. Our rivals have quite a few superstars. Kambez Shakabe with the Rams, the tight end. Jumani Kaur, the wide receiver out of the University of Kentucky with the 49ers. So our division has a handful of new superstar players. A lot of receivers here. Corin Carlson and Matthias Abanda were the top 2 receivers off the board. Both of them have superstar development. We've got a few offensive linemen as well with Talupu Gapia, Ethan McKnight, and Jake Louie with the Rams, along with a couple other first-rounders defensively with Mamoru Kazili and Shamori Dubukuji. So all of these guys add to the list of superstars who we've added within the series. I like how the players from Season 1 are all organized next to each other. I don't know why that was the case for only the Season 1 prospects, whereas you saw all of the guys from this draft class who were kind of all over the list, but what can you do? I do want to point out, though, that there are less Superstar and Superstar X-Factor players in this upcoming draft class, but there are more players who are rated highly, and I'll go into detail a little bit more about that when we talk about the draft episode. But long story short, I did scale the draft classes differently, so there's less higher development trait players and more higher rated players, if that makes sense. Nonetheless, I think our league is in pretty good hands in terms of young talent, and a lot of these teams have exciting players to build around for the future. Let's take a look at the rest of the NFC awards. Puma Whitlock finishes 4th for best quarterback. Jamison Williams 9th for best receiver. Ryan Jensen 2nd for best offensive lineman. Devin White 8th for best linebacker. Jordan Whitehead was 4th for the best defensive back, while Jeff Okuda comes in 9th. And then Cameron Dickers in 4th for the best kicker. So no award winners, which is unfortunate. I didn't really expect anybody to win those, so it's fine, I guess. Let's take a look at the remainder of the playoffs. We're now down to 4 teams. As we know, Atlanta obviously is in the NFC Championship for the number 1 seed in the conference. They're going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who made and lost the Super Bowl last year. And then in the AFC, the Bills and the Jaguars both coming off of upsets in the last round. And sure enough, the two lower-seeded teams end up winning. Dallas throttles Atlanta 28-7, while the Jaguars upset Buffalo 31-21. So we've got the Cowboys and the Jaguars in Super Bowl 60. As for the Pro Bowl, we only had two. Puma Whitlock and Isaiah Likely, both of whom are very well deserved. I'm happy that Puma Whitlock is a first-time Pro Bowler. I'm a little bit surprised we didn't have anybody else, though. I think Jamison Williams certainly makes a good case. I thought Devin White should have made it. I think Jeff Okudah could have made it. Jordan Whitehead certainly should have gotten in. Maybe some of our special teamers as well. But they hate us because they ain't us, I guess. Let's move into the Super Bowl now. And as we simulate into Super Bowl week, the fun thing here is that this is where players' development traits can go up if they had good seasons. On offense, we only have one change, but it's a pretty big one. Isaiah Likely has Superstar X Factor. He moves up for a second consecutive season. That's pretty cool. Now, he is a free agent at the end of the year, so we may not get to enjoy the X Factor if we don't pay him, but it is very well deserved. He's been one of the best tight ends in the league over the last couple of seasons. On defense, we've got a couple guys in the secondary moving up. Jordan Whitehead now is star, very well deserved. And then Jeff Okudah moves up to Superstar X Factor. Now this one I did not see coming, unlike Likely or Whitehead. Jeff Okudah had a pretty good season, but I'm a little bit surprised he moved up. Nonetheless, I'm not complaining. It's going to be a major asset having an X Factor corner in the defensive back room. I'm probably going to give him either shutdown or zone hawk. For those of you who are experts with the abilities, feel free to help me out in the comments. Let's talk about our hidden dev rookies now. We'll start with Cam Lucifer. He is star. Chance Matumolo and Tornado Davis on offense both have star as well. But Ronrakis Barber on defense has superstar. So our fourth-round rookie out of Alabama has a big-time development trait. He obviously had the big kick return against Atlanta, the first kick return of his entire career. And now he is superstar development, and it looks like we've got a great cornerback trio going forward with him, Lucifer, and Okudah. So now let's take a look at the Super Bowl matchup between the Cowboys and the Jaguars. The Chiefs beat the Niners in Season 1. The Patriots beat Dallas last year. So the Cowboys are looking for revenge after losing the Super Bowl. And their opponent's going to be a very tough Jacksonville Jaguars team, who's obviously young and up and coming, led by my long-loxed brethren, Trevor Lawrence, who's now a 95 overall. This Jaguars roster is fairly similar to what they've got in real life. We played against the Jaguars in Week 2 and ended up being a shootout. It was our home opener. We lost 39-32. As for the Dallas Cowboys, they are a little bit more talented. They've got the more experienced quarterback with Dak Prescott. They will be without their best defensive player, though. Micah Parsons out with an injury. That's going to be a big loss for them. Let's see what happens here in Super Bowl 60. And sure enough, the Dallas Cowboys get over their playoff issues of the past. They beat the Jaguars fairly convincingly, 35-17, with a big second quarter and a big fourth quarter. Dak Prescott played a brilliant game. Tony Pollard had multiple big runs for Dallas. Got to assume one of Dak or Pollard ends up being the Super Bowl MVP. I would personally pick Dak. It looks like he was so good throughout the entire game, whereas Tony Pollard had a few really big plays. But still, I understand the rationale for either player. And sure enough, they would give it to Tony Pollard. And here's a look at the rest of the official awards on the right side of your screen with no dragons, unfortunately, which, I mean, we already knew that. So let's take a look at the list of retirements now, and I think we could get hit here. We have a lot of older players on the roster. Guys like Tyron Smith, Khalil Mack, Ryan Jensen, we signed them all at 34 years old last year. So the retirements here include Odell Beckham, DeAndre Hopkins, Levante David, Kirk Cousins, Jake Matthews, Stephon Gilmore, DeMarcus Lawrence. Tyron Smith is done. Honestly, thank goodness. This is the best result we could have gotten because Tyron Smith was under contract for another year. Based off of last season, I didn't really want him to come back. He wasn't all that good. He couldn't stay healthy. I think Roy Osachua very well could be the starting left tackle of the future. I think he's more of a guard, though, so I would expect us to be in the tackle market this free agency. The other older guys like Morgan Moses, Khalil Mack, Ryan Jensen, Jarvis Landry, they all don't retire. All those guys are free agents, and I might look to retain some of them. Maybe not Jarvis Landry because he's a 62 overall, but the others we'll certainly think about. Even though the Tyron Smith signing didn't really work out for us, he's still a great player. He's still going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I do kind of feel bad for him because he was with the Cowboys for a decade and a half. Then he leaves and they immediately win a Super Bowl. The most other notable retirement here was Von Miller with Buffalo, along with a few other older guys as well. So this retirement class should have quite a few Hall of Famers. Let's take a look at the coaching changes now. We'll start with the Buccaneers, who fire Bobby Slowick after just one season. The Buccaneers are now going to have their fourth different coach of the last 4 years. So their recent hires, they've gone for youthful inexperience with guys like Ben Johnson and obviously Slowick last year. They want somebody who has experience, who's been around the block. Raheem Morris has head coaching experience with, ironically, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from 2009 to 2011. That was 15 years ago. I think the Bucs and Morris have both grown since then, and maybe second time's the charm. The Jets are going to part ways with Robert Saleh. Obviously, the highlight of the Robert Saleh era was the failed Aaron Rodgers trade. He was only there for a year. They go out and get Will Levis. Things don't really work out. They're going to hire Kellen Moore, who led the second highest scoring offense this year with the Los Angeles Chargers, and now he will likely mentor their new franchise quarterback. Dan Campbell is out in Detroit. The Lions as well have a young and up-and-coming quarterback with Amari August, who showed some flashes as a rookie. They're going to hire Al Harris, the recently promoted defensive coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys. He was an integral part of developing some of their young pieces within the secondary. He became the DC once Dan Quinn left to be the head coach in Seattle, and he did really well, leading to a head coaching job. And then the Titans are going to fire their head coach, Brian Callahan, after just 2 seasons. And I'm a little bit surprised because I feel like the Titans took some steps up with him this year, but they're going to replace him with the other Bengals coordinator, Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator. So those are the 4 coaching changes around the league. And now it's off-season time. Before we get to free agency, though, I want to recap the college football season real quick, just so we can get some added context of what this draft may look like. And then we'll get into re-signings and free agency and all of that. So let's start with the 12 teams who made the college football playoff. On the right side of the screen, I have listed out all of the notable prospects for each playoff team. The players whose names are bold are projected to go in the first 2 rounds. Players who have an asterisk next to their name are recent additions to the draft class. Some familiar faces here within this playoffs, and some new teams like Minnesota and Texas who have never made the college football playoff. As for the final bracket, the 5-seeded Oregon Ducks end up winning the national championship over Ohio State. Oregon was the best team throughout the season, but they lost in the Big Ten championship to Ohio State. But the Ducks ultimately get revenge. I think Oregon's the most talented team in the country this year, led by quarterback Stanley Cubbage Jr., who is a senior. He went into the year as the projected top quarterback in the class, and he will hold that going into the offseason. He was the best QB in the class this year. He finished in second place for the Heisman, only behind Texas running back Khaled Garrison, who declares for the draft after a great junior season. Oregon's going to have a lot of guys in the first round, including the possible number 1 overall pick, Mimoni Tuliesi, the offensive tackle who won the Outland Award. The biggest storyline of the season might not have been the Ducks. Ohio State's starting quarterback got hurt 3 games into the season. Redshirt freshman Erwin Dundee was thrusted into the starting role, and he ended up playing really well, obviously leading the Buckeyes to the national championship. He will go into next year as a redshirt sophomore and one of the top projected quarterbacks in the draft. Before we wrap up the college segment, here's a look at some of the underclassmen who have entered the draft late. A lot of these guys kind of broke out onto the scene this year unexpectedly. They had really good seasons, and they have now entered the draft, many of whom are projected pretty high picks within the top 100. So these guys could be pretty notable names who we talk about in the draft preview, which of course is the next episode. So with that, we will now shift our attention over to free agency. Our Dragons have a big opportunity to add to this roster. We've got $160 million to spend. That's amongst the top of the league in terms of cap space. Now, we've got to be smart with our money because we've got a handful of players to re-sign, most notably Isaiah Likely and Jamison Williams, arguably our two best receivers, along with multiple linemen on both sides of the ball, multiple players in the secondary, including our starting safeties, Darnell Savage and Jordan Whitehead. So we'll start with these two, Isaiah Likely and Jamison Williams. I think it's a no-brainer to bring both of these guys back. I feel like we'd be foolish to let either of them walk. We'll start with Isaiah Likely. Now, his interest level is awfully low, so we're going to have to give him probably a very player-friendly deal, at least in terms of money. I'm going to offer him a 4-year deal for $14 million a season. That's $56 million total, and he accepts. Isaiah Likely's not going anywhere. He's sticking around. Jamison Williams is in the same boat. Low interest level, so we're going to have to overpay a little bit. 4 years, $58 million. That's $14.5 per season, and he accepts. So Likely and JMO are back. This was the number one priority for us going into the offseason, and both of them return, and they'll be making a lot of money. JMO's going to be making $14.5 million over the next 4 years each, and Likely's going to make $14 over the next 4 years. So that's $30 million per season tied up into those two weapons, but we've got to give Puma Whitlock his best pass catchers in order for him to be at his best. So those two players, as I said, are going to take up around $30 million. We still have $130 left in the bank. We'll start with Ryan Jensen. I thought he had a pretty solid season when healthy. I think it makes sense to bring him back. He'll return on a 1-year deal for around $13 million a season. Javon Kinlaw is really good when healthy. It feels like he's never healthy, but I still want to believe. 1 year, $6.5 million. He says no. He'll test the open market. Devontae Wyatt's played pretty well in limited opportunity. 1 year for $7.5 million. He says no as well. Morgan Moses, we got via trade last year from New England. When he played, he was really good. 1 year, $6 million. He's back. Presley Harvin, the punter, will also return for 2 years. And that's it. Those are the only players we're going to offer here. We're letting go of some very notable players on both sides of the ball. And this includes quite a few players who have been with us since the start during the expansion draft, including quarterback Mitchell Trubisky. And for now, we're only going to have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. We're letting go of a couple big offensive linemen with Kenyon Green and Ed Ingram. Green was dependable in terms of him playing a lot, but I feel like he was inconsistent. Ed Ingram's had his struggles here, but I feel like he did kind of turn a corner towards the end of this season, and I wouldn't be opposed to bringing either player back on the open market. Khalil Mack, I thought, had a good season for us, and I wouldn't mind bringing him back as well, but I believe in these young pass rushers. B.J. Ojulari and Trajan Blyshenden are ready to take the next step. Damone Clark, I thought, played pretty well when healthy. The problem is he missed 9 games this year. I think $24 million is a little bit obscene. And then in the secondary, Eric Stokes, Darnell Savage, and Jordan Whitehead all will not be receiving extensions. It's probably a pretty big deal not offering our 2 starting safeties, Whitehead in particular, because he had a great season for us. The reason why I'm not going to offer Whitehead is because he's 29. I feel like he could start to regress, and I'd rather not pay him when his value is the highest. And we also just drafted Samasoni Soluni in the 2nd round. I'm not opposed to offering him on the open market as well, but I'm hoping that there's going to be a younger option at safety who we can pair up with Soluni in the long term. We've got $111 million left to spend. We used around $50 million annually in re-signings, and we've still got a lot of money available and a lot of flexibility, so we're hoping that this free agency class ends up being a pretty good one because we've got a good opportunity to spend. Let's take a look at the list of free agents, and there are some notable names in here. Mark Andrews and Gregory Rousseau sit atop the list. Handful of good offensive linemen as well, including Lane Johnson and Joe Thuney. But overall, this free agency class really is not very good. It's top-heavy with good players like Andrews and Rousseau, and then there's a big drop-off. It's not like last year where there was a lot of talent. This free agency class is kind of bad. We can add to our money by making some cuts here, and we will release Michael Gallup. He's been on a big contract, and he's now entering the final season, meaning his savings goes up and his penalty goes down. Gallup regressed a lot this offseason, and that doesn't even account for him being the dud of the year, and his rating went down by an additional 3 points. Had he not gotten the dud of the year, I think we could have gotten maybe a 6th or a 7th rounder for him. But since he falls all the way to a 75, I don't think he has much value, so we're going to release him. Thank you for your time here, Mr. Gallup, but I think it's in everybody's best interest that we move on and we fully focus on the development of the young receivers who we already have. So that's going to open up around $12 million. I think the biggest part of losing Gallup, not so much that we're losing a wide receiver, but we're losing one of our team captains. So we're going to be looking for some more leadership here in free agency. I was hoping there'd be some safety talent. There's no one who really entices me, so we're going to go back to Jordan Whitehead, and we're going to offer him a 1-year, very player-friendly extension to hopefully pair him up with Semasoni Saluni in the back end of the secondary. I want to get a new third linebacker now that Damone Clark is gone and he wants a lot of money. Jermaine Pratt's been a solid starter with the Bengals for a while. I think he'd be the perfect fit for us. We're going to offer him 1 year for very player-friendly, around $8 million or so. We know we want to add more reinsurances to the offensive line. This has been the weakness for us for a while, and I think a player who is kind of the diamond in the rough is Zach Tom. He's been a starter with the Packers for the last 3 years at left tackle, and he's played really well. He's got a ton of versatility as well. He's got experience at tackle, guard, and center. He can play everywhere on the line. We're going to give him a 3-year deal for around $25 million. I think this could end up being a bargain. I really like his skill set, and I think he's going to be a really good fit. I wouldn't mind signing one of these big fish like Joe Thuney or Lane Johnson. Between the two of them, I think we're going to look at Lane Johnson. So last year, we went after an older, injury-prone tackle in Tyron Smith. It didn't work out, and we're going to do it again. I'm a little bit more confident with Lane Johnson because his injury rating is at 83, whereas Tyron Smith's was like 67. Lane Johnson hasn't really shown many signs of getting worse, and I think he'll be able to provide some of the leadership that we're going to be looking for, especially with Michael Gallup gone. Now, we're not going to make the same mistake we did with Tyron Smith by offering a multi-year contract. In case this blows up in our face, like it did with Smith, I'd rather have an out after the first year, so we'll offer him 1 year for $24.5 million. I wouldn't be surprised if he retires anyway, but just in case. The last offer for stage 1, I want to look on the defensive line. Grover Stewart and Grady Jarrett both look like pretty solid fits. We've got some young talent at defensive tackle, but with Javon Kinlaw and Devontae Wyatt saying no to our extensions, I think one of these guys would make a lot of sense. And between the two of them, I like Grady Jarrett a little bit more. I think he's been a little bit more productive as a pass rusher. He's been just as good as a run stopper, and he's going to be cheaper per year as opposed to Grover Stewart. Jarrett has spent most of his career with Atlanta. He was with the Bears last year where he was pretty solid, and we're going to offer him a 1-year deal. Again, looking to add some veteran leadership on the defensive line. So these are going to be the 5 offers for stage 1. Again, I was hoping this free agency class would be better, but when life gives you lemons, you got to make lemonade. So let's simulate through the first stage of free agency, and it looks like only 2 players have accepted. Them being the 2 offensive linemen, Lane Johnson and Zach Tom, are both here. Grady Jarrett and Jermaine Pratt are still testing the market. They've gotten additional offers, while Jordan Whitehead leaves for Atlanta. They are going to give him the 3-year contract that he wanted. I was not willing to give him 3 years because he's 29, but I think this is still a good pickup for Atlanta. If you can't beat him, join him, I guess. Atlanta must have saw how well Jordan Whitehead played against them in the divisional round, and they were like, yeah, we need him on our team, and I honestly can't blame them. So there is certainly less talent available here in free agency. We still have the 2 guys we're offering. I think I'm going to take my offer off of Jermaine Pratt, however, while Grady Jarrett, we are going to increase his. I want to make sure we get Grady Jarrett, whereas with Pratt, I don't want to get into a bidding war. I'd rather spend less money on a guy like Nakobe Dean, who has started with the Eagles. He was replaced by first-round rookie Marcus Jackson, one of the superstar X factors of the draft class. And along with Jarrett and Dean, we're going to go after 8 other players, including Greg Dortch. I want to bring him back after a year in Minnesota, and some other guys here, including Javon Kinlaw and Devontae Wyatt, who we were unable to re-sign earlier. Let's simulate into stage 3 now. Most of those guys ended up accepting. Grady Jarrett signs. Greg Dortch signs. Nakobe Dean signs. We're able to re-sign Ed Ingram and Javon Kinlaw. We also bring in Kachel Clark and Yaya Diaby. The other three guys, Yannick Ngakoue, Devontae Wyatt, and Sincere Lorenzo, are still looking to test out their markets, but it doesn't look like those guys really have a market. There's nobody else who I really want to give an offer to right now in free agency, so I think we're going to be done spending. But I do want to take a look at the trade market. Now, I will say I don't think there are many glaring holes on this roster, and there aren't many players in the league who I feel like we have to get right now, like we did last year with Jameson Williams. If there was one position group that I think we could look to improve, it's probably safety. But it's a very good safety draft class upcoming, so I don't think we need to make a trade for one of these guys. Now, if we were to make a move, I think the player that would make the most sense is Malik Hooker with the Dallas Cowboys. I could see them looking to get a little bit younger. He's on the last year of his deal. I think it could make sense, but for now, we're going to hold off. Let's take a look at some moves around the rest of the league, though, and there are quite a few big ones. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been a train wreck over the last few years, and they're going to start selling house. Vita Vea is going to the Seahawks for a third-rounder. Vita Vea is a little bit older now, so that's why he's going to cost a little bit less, but now he is in our division. The Lions are looking for a number one corner. They will trade a fourth and a sixth for Jamel Dean. Here's the big deal. Quinnen Williams is going to the Browns. The Jets are going to give up Quinnen Williams, a third-rounder, and a fourth-rounder, while the Browns will trade away a first and a second, including the 13th pick in the draft. This is a whole lot to give up, but for Quinnen Williams, one of the best defensive players in the NFL, in his prime, I think it could be worth it. And then last but not least, Harold Landry is going to the Falcons for a sixth-rounder. The Falcons have a few guys from Tennessee. Arthur Smith comes from the Titans, so Harold Landry reunites with a few coaches, and I think he's going to be a better fit in the Atlanta scheme. Let's recap free agency now. The other three players who we had offers on accept, so everybody who we wanted after stage one ends up signing. A trend that I've noticed in this series is within any given free agency period in the offseason, there's like 4 teams that do all the spending. That was the case again this year, but the interesting thing is that these 4 teams are all in the same division. It was the NFC South's spending spree over this offseason. So Mark Andrews signs with the Panthers. Greg Rousseau goes to the Bucks. The Panthers also end up getting Joe Thuney as well, adding some big-time pieces to the offense for Bryce Young. TJ Edwards re-ups with the Atlanta Falcons. Looking down the board a little bit, Tyler Algier signs with the Saints. Jordan Whitehead goes to the Falcons. Cole Holcomb to the Saints. Tyrann Mathieu to the Falcons. Tyler Lockett to the Falcons. Common theme here, it's just the NFC South. As for the former Dragons, Darnell Savage goes to the Titans. Eric Stokes ends up with the Eagles. Damone Clark is with, guess who, the New Orleans Saints. Kenyon Green ends up with, guess who, the New Orleans Saints. It's literally the NFC South spending all the money here in free agency, so this division is going to be quite fascinating next season. That'll end up wrapping up today's episode. Free agency is in the books, and next episode will be the draft preview as we take another look at the draft class. We talk about some possibilities for the Dragons along with some of the other top selections within this class, so that should be a lot of fun. The following episode, of course, will be the 2026 NFL Draft. I hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Let me know what you thought of our offseason down below in the comments, or at least our free agency. I guess our offseason isn't done yet. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.